Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei becomes a god of all part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. One stormy night, a certain couple spent several hours inside a shrine they both had never seen or heard of. Issei Hyoudou gazed calmly at the storm that flooded the entirety of Karakura Town, a little away from the shrine's entrance exit. In his embrace, enjoying the slight warmth he emitted, was his wife, Issei Hyoudou. The Karakura could easily tell, really worried and anxious. The reason for that was that they had tried to have a child 2 times in the last 2 years. And failed both times because of complications during Issei's pregnancy. Issei shared his wife's feelings on the matter. That is, before he entered the shrine they temporarily used as a shelter from the storm. After all, this was the day they had been informed by their doctor that Issei was pregnant. For the 3rd time. A strange yet very welcome calmness overcame his being as soon as he entered the unknown shrine. The building had no signs as to which god it belonged to. Except for a Christian church on the other side of Kuo, there were some Shinto shrines dedicated to, mostly, Amaterasu, the Shinto goddess of the sun. This small building, that was at the farthest end of Kuo, on a small hill overlooking the town, however, did not seem to belong to anyone. Aside from a simple 2x2 mat, it had nothing else. Or, so the 2 future parents thought. They were too busy to get out of the storm to take the time to examine the, admittedly, small room. Unseen from both, right behind them at the wall, there was a small 2-handed sheathed sword, seemingly hanging from the ceiling. Its handle was white, with 4 black diamonds, real diamonds on each side of the handle. A simple red ribbon, long enough to reach the ceiling, was tied all around the handle, showing only the diamonds. The seemingly plain blade was one-sided, curving a little inward at the end. Where the blade and handle united, there was a thin, dull gold dot. As for it was the same plain red color as the ribbon. All in all, it was just a plain sword to the normal eyes. Inside the extended ribbon, there were 2 glassy orbs, each one the size of a golf ball, hidden perfectly from every species' prying eyes. They were, carefully, tied, one after the other, where the handle ended. One orb had 2 ethereal colors circling inside it. Black and orange. Each in equal amounts. The other one, however, had a variety of colors, not unlike a rainbow. Orange-red, yellow coated on orange-red, purple-black coated on orange-red, bright crimson and, finally, pure and shiny gold. Out of all 3 objects, the second orb was the most beautiful. And, unbeknownst to everyone in this universe, the most powerful one. Well, almost everyone. There was a sentient entity inside the sword who knew about this fact. That said, it respected the pure unadulterated power coming from that orb. Not that the other orb's powers, or the sword itself, for that matter, were insignificant. On the contrary, if used wisely, both powers were forces to be reckoned with, both individually and united. However, the beautiful orb's powers were on a whole other level. Especially if they were combined with the other 2. Anyway, you get the point how broken the guy-girl, who gained those powers, would be. That said, those powers could, only, be used by a human. And not any ordinary human. A human had to have an affinity for the supernatural. So, the sword, the only object with a sentient being inside it, and the only one capable of sensing anything with a supernatural affinity, would choose, carefully, the human the 3 powers would reside in. After all, they waited there, inside the small room, for centuries. Hoping that, sometime, there would come a human with a good heart to wield them. Well, that was what that gigantic red dragon had told the sword inside that void between all worlds and universes, with all and no colors, before bringing all 3 of them to the same room they were hanging from. With the sole excuse that this world needed protection. Nobody had even come close to this place. So, the entity inside the sword was, understandably, surprised that 2 humans came inside the small place on a rainy day. Tragically ironic, considering that the entity itself, as well as its previous wielder, hated the rain. The pleasantry, however, was that this couple of humans were pure-hearted ones. And, additionally, the woman was pregnant. What both humans couldn't and would never have known was that their unborn child had supernatural affinity from what the entity inside the sword could sense. The boy. Good. The entity didn't want to have to do with a super powerful girl and deal with her mood swings. Girls were difficult to deal with. Boys, on the other hand, were easy. Almost too easy. And seeing that these soon-to-be parents of one unborn boy were good people, the entity decided to become the reason why their son would become the most powerful human in this world. This human would become this world's #1 protector. Like the entity's previous wielder, whose name it could never forget. Just like he knew of the 2 orbs' origins and what powers they withheld. As well as which power each color represented. So, when the storm died down and the 2 humans got out of the small place, probably going back to their home, the entity untied the ribbon from the ceiling. It manifested itself in human form and followed the two humans, not caring how much noise it made. It couldn't be seen from regular humans. The grin it sported was full of glee, even if it came out as bloodthirsty. As it was walking, the entity untied the two orbs and got a look at them. They shined brightly, their colors doing a seemingly happy dance inside the small confinement of the glass. Its grin widened in satisfaction that the orbs seemed to be as excited as itself was. The entity released its hold on the orbs and watched in untamed satisfaction how they shot themselves inside the woman's belly without hurting her and getting inside the unborn boy. Then, the manifested entity shot itself as well in the same place the orbs now inhabited, leaving the plain-looking sword hovering behind the parents and following them, without being able to be seen by regular eyes. When the two humans reached their simple two-story house, the entity sent the sword to the only vacant room for when the child would be born. In the meantime, it had to make preparations for the future protector of the world. It had to seal the dangerous powers inside the orbs in order to activate them when the boy would reach his mid-teens, an age when the boy would be able to comprehend the burden that would befall on his shoulders, as well as capable of wielding said powers. Not to mention the boy's own power. Which managed to surprise, pleasantly at that, the entity. Leaving aside the physical enhancements the powers would give the boy as soon as it was born, as well as the boy's own power, the entity sealed the rest for the aforementioned time. It only had one hope. That the boy wouldn't turn out to be, or become, a prude, just like its previous wielder was. Issei Hyoudou. That was the name Akane and Goro Hyoudou decided for their only son. Pure and honest, like his namesake. And, from what the doctors had told them after the boy's birth, it was an unexplained miracle that Akane had been pregnant for the third time in the first place. Not to mention that her pregnancy had no complications whatsoever. So, for the Hyoudou parents, with no close relatives to speak of, their little Issei was their miracle. Their shine and joy. They never, even once, commented on some of his abnormalities as Issei grew up. The boy was strong. His hearing, sense of smell and eyesight were out of this world. His dark green eyes turned to reptilian slits when agitated. His teeth were able to bite off oak wood like it was paper, with his longer than normal canines being his strongest teeth. Also, he was, almost unnaturally, warm to the point he didn't even need winter clothes. Lastly, the boy seemed like he teleported when he ran around. And, since the doctors had said that he was a miracle, the two parents took it literally and were ecstatic for their son's abilities. They were, especially, proud that he remained humble as he grew up. As amazing as his abilities were, there were some downsides for the young boy. Issei had only one friend. It was only because of his sense of smell that he could tell that Rin was, actually, a girl named Issei Hyoudou. The boy was devastated when Rin had to move and go to England with her parents at the early age of 7 years old. The boy had done nothing but mope and sadness in his room for 3 days. He only got out of it to go to the toilet. Not even for food or water. He had a serious crush on Rin, and he didn't even know it. The parents were devastated themselves for not being able to help their son in his time of need. Not only that, but it seemed that Issei didn't even want their help in the first place. After the 3 days had passed, Issei had decided to go to the park he and Rin used to play at. It was close to their house and, so, his parents let him go. They trusted him enough to return, at the very least, on time for dinner. He was a good boy, with a heart of gold, and would never try to, actively, make them upset with him. That day, without the parents knowing, at one side of that park, there was an old man spouting stories of how glorious the of women were. Issei, being the curious boy he was, just listened, absently, from the swing he was sitting on. He didn't want to be with the other kid sitting in front of the old man and listening closely with unrestrained excitement. Even if he was there with the other children, the boy knew that things would be awkward, considering the others all but shunned him, due to his abnormalities. They had, openly, admitted that they were afraid of him. So, there was no reason to make them even more fearful of him. In the end, even those stories couldn't fill the void that Rin had left behind. That wasn't to say, however, that Issei wasn't, at the very least, curious. He was a great deal curious. Not only for those the old man had been spouting off the whole afternoon, but the whole female body. In layman's terms, the opposite sex. At night, the Hyoudou parents couldn't even begin to describe their joy upon seeing their son's spirits not on the dumps. He seemed curious about something, but not enough to make him, completely, forget Rin's departure. Akane could never have expected the conversation the family had as soon as they finished eating their dinner, Issei included, after 3 days and nights of absence. Goro, on the other hand, was positively ecstatic. His baby boy was growing up. For Akane, it was weird to see her husband have the talk with their son when the latter was only 7 years old. Even weirder was that, no matter how many bumps she had created on his head with her wooden spoon, her husband kept on with the conversation like nothing had happened. It seemed gorgeous pride and joy were affecting his sense of pain. Even worse, her son listened to his father with rapt attention. And, worst of all, her husband told their son of his unfulfilled dream of having a harem. Her only solace was that her son didn't seem very eager to fulfill Goru's dream for the both of them. That said, Issei's wistful face and matching tone when he had uttered that he wanted to be loved had almost crashed her hopes. Almost. Even if he had looked simply adorable at that moment. Because, even if she didn't share her husband's beliefs on the matter, Akane wanted many grandchildren to spoil. So, in the end, Issei would have to have many women by his side in order for her dream to come to fruition. Unbeknownst to all three humans, the entity inside the boy was extremely satisfied with everything it had seen so far through its future wielder's eyes. Except from the 3 days the boy had stayed in his room, those were a living hell, or rather, a living storm. Just like the one when it had first seen these humans, only thrice the duration. All in all, it seemed it had chosen well. Especially since, after that night, its wielder decided to become even better of a person. Proper table manners. Studying for school with extreme diligence. Helping Akane in housework for whatever and whenever she needed, even outside of their house. Working out. Learning to fight properly through action movies and YouTube videos. Learning swordsmanship through the school's kendo club and the neighboring dojo. Even learning all kinds of dances. As well as studying strategies through online chess and other online books and videos. All that in order to become the perfect boyfriend material. As well as a very acceptable and versatile member in society. Then, when Issei reached 12 years old, Goru allowed him access to porn sites in order to see how babies were made. To its utter amusement, the entity inside Issei discovered its wielder's fetishes. Despite him not showing it, the boy was a pure sadist with a romantic side and a love for both boobs no matter the size and butts. Girls in stockings, high heels and every other sexy undergarment. Last, but not least, role play and cosplay, with Issei's personal favorite being the strict business women that break down and become mindless and masochistic sluts. Issei was no homosexual, but he held no ill will towards them either. The same went for gender-bended people, as well as traps. Anyway, at the age of 14, Issei had, already, become a master in kendo, but with no physical indication he was one, like a gold medal in a tournament. He had gotten the recommendation that he could be a shishu, though, if he ever wanted. His overall fighting skills were through the roof, and his physical strength was on a whole other level than from when he was just a small child. A well-mannered boy, wearing his golden heart on his sleeve. His physique was that of an averagely tall teen, with a lean and muscular figure, yet not overly so. His hair was short, milk chocolate in color and spiky enough to point in every possible direction. His facial features were sharp, like his dark green eyes. All in all, his looks gave him the bad boy, yet enticing vibe that girls his age and a little older seemed to love. His lightly tanned, flawless skin completed his roguish looks. Though, due to his reputation from his childhood, he was still alone and without any friends. Even the girls didn't dare to approach him, only admiring him from a distance. His parents were proud of him, especially since he had become the top student in school, which was all that mattered to him. The same with the entity inside of him, even if he didn't know about it. Yet, all in all, Issei had been growing up like a proper young man, albeit with several more abilities. The entity decided to make itself known to its wielder, as well as about all said wielder's other powers, including the one he was born with. Issei was strong and sturdy enough to withhold all these powers, without his human body being destroyed from the inside. After all, the entity had ensured that the sword was, always, close to Issei, no matter where the brunette was. Line break, it was the night of Issei's graduation from junior high school. In other words, the last day of school, right before spring break. After which the spring break, Issei would enter high school as a freshman, or a first-year student, in one of the most prestigious schools of the whole country. Guo Academy. An all-girls school, turning co-ed on the new school year. As a matter of fact, the Hyoudou boy would be the one with the top scores ever entering the school. As for the other boys entering with him, they were the only ones that passed the entrance exams. Aside from many diligent girls, of course. Thankfully, the Japanese school system didn't require the top freshman to give a speech on the first day of the school year. Just be there early and leave when the day ends. As well as get acquainted with the other students and teachers, or the whole school in general. Akane was so proud of her son that they had all of Issei's favorite foods for dinner that night. Goru had tried and failed to tease his son, as well as probe him to start his harem in high school. After they had dinner, of course. No fun was worthy of his wife's famous wooden spoon attacks on his head. The Hyoudou matriarch, however, all but demanded of her son to find a girlfriend and get married quickly in order to have her grandbabies to spoil as soon as possible. Issei, for his part, could only sweat drop at his parents' antics. After that, the brunette had a shower and, then, went to sleep. He wasn't tired, but the excitement of the day, as well as his overall performance during the exams, had taken its toll on him. So, he decided to rest early. What he didn't expect, though, especially upon entering his room, was to find a sheathed sword on his bed. Issei narrowed his eyes in suspicion as he lightly closed and locked the door behind him with practiced ease. He would have known if his father had bought it. Goro couldn't hold his excitement for anything, even if a cane spooned him on the head. Case in point the talk when he was only 7. And any other time Goro was truly excited. So, no. His father wasn't the one to buy it. The cane only got out of the house for grocery shopping with gorgeous money, so it wasn't her either. So, the question remained. How did that sword get on his bed if nobody from the family, including himself, never even bought one? This suspicion grew to its highest point when he had reached the bed and loomed over the sword. That said, Issei felt a great sense of familiarity with the sword, which made no sense to him whatsoever. Why was he feeling so familiar with a sword of all things, especially one he had never even seen? He, subconsciously, used his right hand to reach towards the sword on his bed. As soon as he touched it, he was hit with a tidal wave of information. Of course, he couldn't have known that. So, he was left breathless, with his eyes wide in complete disbelief at what was getting inside his mind. Hours. And lots of them. Even the knowledge to control them and use them in a fight, or even in his daily life. Not to mention the fighting techniques themselves. He was so much in shock from it all that he couldn't even move. That said, as soon as the flood of information had finished to be so ruthlessly dumped in his mind, did Issei manage to draw a breath. Even then, all that did was to make him aware of his surroundings and how dizzy he was from the ordeal. Now, truly tired, the brunette sloppily collapsed on his bed, thankfully in his boxers, with his right hand gripping the sheathed sword like his life depended on it. His last thought before sleep overcame him was that whatever had happened was surreal, like almost a dream. In layman's terms, Issei fainted on his bed. Line break. Issei's eyes fluttered open, and he was almost blinded by the sun's bright light. He managed to notice, however, that the sunlight came from behind him and not directly above him. With some more effort, and his left arm shielding the upper half of his face, Issei opened his eyes fully and stood up in order to take in his surroundings. Doing a slow spin on his place, the brunette took a look around and was surprised at what he saw. He was on a sandy shore, still in his boxers that he wore after he got out of the shower. Calm, crystal blue sea water, with the sand and small rocks that he could clearly see as if he was upon them, were gently rocked back and forth from the small waves the sea was making. The shore he was on seemed to be a clearing from a thick and dark forest. An extremely tall, unnaturally so, oak tree was easily seen from the shore. It was the only distinguishable tree and it was, seemingly, in the middle of the forest. Issei didn't want to enter the forest due to him liking the weather on the shore. Not to mention that it was creepy as hell. As strong as he was, he didn't feel confident enough to come across whatever was in the forest. His ears and nose twitched as he breathed in. Aside from the scent of trees, sand and sea, Issei caught one more scent that made him freeze in shock as he faced the entrance exit of the forest. Despite how slow and purposeful the footsteps he heard were, his heartbeat rose to 150 the moment he caught the scent. His heartbeat rose even more as soon as the person he had caught the scent of came out in the clearing, with their hands behind their back and stopping as soon as they locked gazes. The figure gave a roguishly bloodthirsty smirk as they greeted him. "Yo, pretty boy." Issei couldn't believe his eyes, which had widened to the size of dinner plates in utter disbelief. After all, nobody had claimed to have seen themselves right in front of them. In clear view. Not in the mirror. Issei just knew that, aside from all kinds of weird things, this meeting was anything but normal. Line break. The two-layered, almost menacing voice that greeted him was, actually, not an unexpected development. Issei shook his head violently at that a couple of times to regain his composure. He was in a place that he hadn't even read about or seen on the internet, for that matter, with a duplicate of himself who seemed to be his opposite in every sense of the word. Taking a good look at his duplicate, Issei saw their differences, except from the other one's voice that was, as previously mentioned, two-layered and menacing. Their only similarity was that they had the same looks. Said person had the same spikiness on his hair, albeit a plain white color. In general, wherever Issei had color on his person, including his skin and eyes, his counterpart had that plain white. Wherever there was white on Issei, the other one had black. Including the sheathed sword. Issei's eyes widened in recognition upon seeing his counterpart holding the same sword as himself. His albino self-smirk widened upon seeing his expression. "So, you recognize the sword? Good." The albino Issei commented in satisfaction. Issei's eyes narrowed as he locked eyes with his other self, thinking of the impossibility of what happened to him right before he fainted to be real. He shifted his stance to a defensive one, as his fists trembled from how much pressure he was putting on them. In his right hand, the sword trembled like his fist. "What happened before you fainted was very real. I assure you." The albino told him in clear amusement, enjoying how Issei stiffened and widened his eyes in surprise. "It's like he can read my mind." Issei thought in alarm. As if to mock his disbelief on the matter, the white Issei laughed uproariously for a whole minute before, suddenly, turning somber and serious. Of course, I can, you dumbass for a king. We're inside your mind, after all. There was a pregnant silence between them, with Issei closing his eyes and coming to terms with what was happening, albeit with great difficulty. His albino self was kind enough to let him do so at his own pace. After Issei calmed down from the whole ordeal, he opened his eyes and seemed to be far calmer than he was before the pause. Not completely, but he could hold a decent conversation without making a fool of himself. You know this is all kinds of weird, right? The brunette asked almost rhetorically, without being sarcastic at all. The albino Issei deadpanned at him, as if to say you're telling me that, right? Issei coughed in his left hand to hide his embarrassment. His mind, still, ran a mile a minute in order to comprehend what was happening to him as he, once again, locked gazes with his other self. After another long pause between them, Issei asked the first question that came to his mind. Why me? His voice came out quiet and genuinely curious. Yet, the way he sounded came out like the confused teenager that he was. To answer your question, the albino's voice turned completely serious as he explained what needed to be done in order to, completely, answer the brunette's question. We have to wait until you wake up. After you go through your morning routine, tell your parents to go on a walk together. Specifically, where they went on a certain night when your mother was at her early stages of pregnancy. Issei was left more confused than he was before at that explanation. Seeing that, the albino sighed in, barely restrained, frustrated at his wielder's stupidity. Where I want you to go, I left my memories behind. Once you go there, my memories will get in your mind, like how the other powers got in your being, including mine. And, just so you know, I only know what your other powers are. Nothing else, not even a memory. The white Issei explained further, barely hiding his frustration. Issei, not wanting to, actually, anger his counterpart, nodded in acceptance. Another pause, with Issei looking around the tranquil place, calmness overtaking his being. Satisfied with what he was seeing, the albino's black lips twitched upwards in a smirk that matched his sentiment. Since this whole thing, with me having these baddest powers, is real, what else is? Issei asked in calm curiosity. I dunno. The albino answered honestly with a nonchalant shrug of his shoulders as his arms were crossed against his chest. Though, I believe there is more weird shit out there. He finished calmly, not bothered by what he just said. They locked gazes, again. Both were completely calm and tranquil, like the place they were standing on. There even was a calm breeze that ruffled their hair gently as it was blowing. Issei switched his gaze towards the tallest tree in the forest and, before he could even voice his question about it, his albino self beat him to it. That oak tree is the foundation of this world. Should it fall, either by us two fighting each other or by whatever affects you mentally from the real world, you'll lose your sanity. That said, you can bring it back to the state you're seeing it at by being calm and collected, like you're now. If you lose your sanity, however, it'll be way more difficult to regain it. He explained thoroughly in a deadly serious manner. Issei, for his part, didn't look away from the tree during the explanation. He was, still, as calm as could be, despite the topic discussed being grim. If I lose my sanity, he muttered under his breath. Shaking his head lightly, his eyes landed on his counterparts once again. This time, though, the albino saw something in Issei's eyes that made him, internally, pleasantly surprised. Determination. And a lot of it. That determination was the same his previous wielder had. The albino couldn't suppress his satisfied smirk from coming on his face. I'll never let that happen. Issei spoke strongly, expressing the same determination his narrowed eyes were showing. And, to the albino's further surprise, he added in the same tone. For both of our sakes, Zangetsu. Just as he said that, Issei faded away from his mindscape, leaving behind the now named Zangetsu. Said person was both gobsmacked that he was accepted so easily from his new wielder, as well as positively ecstatic by said wielder calling his name. Zangetsu laughed uproariously to express his joy for the latter fact. He, also, couldn't wait to see what kind of impact would Issei have on this world. When his laughter died down, he noticed that both his hands felt a little heavy. And, for that, another round of laughter began. Line break. Issei woke up feeling strangely refreshed. His body felt lighter, despite the colossal amount of power he carried within him. Speaking of carrying, he opened his eyes and saw that he was on his bed, but had changed positions, and, now, he was staring at the ceiling of his room. Then, he felt both of his hands. Or, more specifically, what they were holding. To his great satisfaction, which was expressed by a victorious smirk, there were two unsheathed swords in his hands. And? Google it as Ichigo Kurosaki True Shikai and you'll see them. Knowing what he had to do, in order to not carry them, he, mentally, dismissed the sword's real form and it reverted back to what he had seen on his bed last night. Though, he had to put the sword in its sheath. After he did that, he got up and stretched his whole body, getting satisfied once he heard the pops of his bones. Wearing a small smile on his lips, he went to his wardrobe and took out a pair of plain gray tracksuit pants and a matching t-shirt, which he, swiftly, put on himself. along with a pair of short black socks. The scent of breakfast had gotten in his nose as soon as he woke up, so he knew that his mother was in the kitchen. However, his father didn't seem to be at home. Issei's father seemed to be on trials for a promotion in his job, so he had taken it very seriously in order to provide better for his small family. So, Goro had to work even on weekends and breaks like this one. Issei was proud of his father. He wanted to be like him when he made a family of his own. And, considering the last few years, he strived to be even better in that department. All that said, he was slightly sad that his father was away and they wouldn't go outside as a family. Issei descended the stairs without making a sound, heading towards his mother's whereabouts. "Morning, Ka-chan." Issei greeted his mother as soon as he entered the kitchen and took a seat on the table, waiting patiently for his mother's exquisite breakfast. The cane had become used to her son being soundless when he moved around the house. Even when he moved all kinds of furniture, especially the almost weightless chairs, he made no sound whatsoever. It was for that reason she wasn't spooked to death when he spoke. "Morning, honey." She chirped happily as she prepared their dishes. Once she set the table, they both clasped their hands and prayed for their food in a dignified manner, bowing their heads and all. Itadakimasu. It took them only 15 minutes to finish their meal. Once that was done, Issei, on his own volition, cleaned up the table, washed and dried the dishes, after which he wiped his hands with a clean towel. "Ice, darling, I have to do grocery shopping," his mother announced as took off her plain white apron, revealing that she was ready for what she wanted to do. A plain blue, long-sleeved shirt and a pair of light blue jeans was enough for this time of year to get out. Her outfit, however, didn't appeal to her natural beauty. Light brown hair and eyes. Slim, yet curvy figure and a perfectly flawless face and fair skin. For a woman in her late 30s, she was quite beautiful. Perfect timing. Issei thought, remembering what Zangetsu told him to do today. "I'll come and help, Ka-chan. I've got nothing better to do anyway." He told her honestly, hiding, for now, what he had in mind. After all, he could tell her to go on a walk after they finished their shopping. Her dazzling smile was a reward he would take every day for the rest of his life, if he could help it. "Thank you, Ice." Hearing his mother calling him by the nickname she had invented herself when he was only 3 years old, along with her smile, made his heart melt in happiness. Wearing their plain black running shoes on the way out, Issei and Akane took off towards the market. Line break. Issei had done this many times already, doing grocery shopping with his mother. Being more than dignified outside of the house hid the fact that both Akane and Goro had their quirks. Especially when it had to do with teasing him and the matter of grandbabies. Each and every time he helped his mother outside of the house, Issei kept himself from snorting at the irony of it all. Anyhow, once the food shopping was done, they passed by a small clothing store on their way back home. The clothing store was nothing special, but it had a discount on scarves. And, for some reason, Issei felt compelled to wear one. So, he stopped outside, causing his mother to stop as well. He had turned his head to stare at the scarves. Akane turned to face her son, carrying a small bag of groceries in each hand. Her son carried 3 heavy bags in each hand, but she wasn't worried that he would be tired. After all, she knew that her son was quite strong. "What is it, Ice?" she asked curiously. Issei didn't answer her verbally. He gestured with his head towards the displayed scarves, as his body was, still, facing the way they were going at. Akane glanced at what her son was staring at and smiled softly, before facing her son again, still wearing that smile. "You want one, honey?" she asked sweetly, her tone soft. "Yeah." Issei nodded as he spoke softly as well, before he faced his mother. Said person tilted her head, cutely, to the right in curious wonder. Her son seemed serious about having a scarf. However, something about this matter was amiss. As if reading her mind, Issei answered her unasked question in a soft, quiet tone. "I want it to be special." Akane nodded slowly in understanding. Akane and Goro had been given things they, both, considered special. Issei, on the other hand, had absolutely nothing. Not even Irina gave him something to hold on to remember her by. Issei, at the very least, had given Irina a small piece of paper that read "I'll miss you, Rin. And the brunette had written it in perfect handwriting. So, yeah. Akane could understand her son's wish to have something special on his person. Even better, it was something he could wear on his person at all times. And the best part was that she could make it herself from scratch. Another dazzling smile appeared on Akane's face as the thought crossed her mind, which made Issei's heart pound in happiness. "Then, this Ka-chan will make her baby boy a special scarf," she said happily, not remembering they were outside and she had, subconsciously, tried to embarrass her son while also making his hidden wish come true. She made a twirl on the spot before starting to walk towards their home. Due to her joy, she didn't even notice that she was humming a happy tune and that she had a small pep in her steps. For once, Issei didn't care about his mother's antics in public. He was smiling softly at her indirect declaration of love for her son. Without him noticing, he had already started to follow her, his whole being feeling lighter after the ordeal outside of that small clothing store. Once they returned home and put all the groceries in their proper places, Issei remembered something. Thankfully, his mother had made all the needed preparations to start on their lunch. And, speaking of said meal, they had plenty of time before that. "Hey, Kachan?" Issei called from the fridge. "Yes, honey," came the reply from the cabinets on the opposite side of where he was. Issei closed the fridge before he straightened his back and turned to face his mother, who had turned her head to look at him in curiosity. "Can we go for a relaxing walk outside, since the weather is nice?" he asked nicely with a small smile. His mother glanced at the clock on the kitchen's wall and saw that there was plenty of free time before lunch. And it seemed that her son wasn't in a hurry to have his special scarf. Also, the weather outside was, indeed, nice, as her son said. She nodded in acceptance with another one of her dazzling smiles before getting her purse from the living room sofa, where she had thrown it upon entering their home. In the few seconds she needed to do that, however, an idea came to her mind. An idea that, unbeknownst to her, was what exactly her son had in mind. She would have them go to the place where her husband and herself had gone the night they learned she was pregnant with a baby boy that was standing in front of her. The same baby boy that always had a way of making her proud and happy. Issei, quietly, followed his mother out of the house before coming to her side on the sidewalk. The cane wore a serene smile on her face as she walked slowly towards the destination in her mind. Despite going there only once, she knew how to get there, like she had just gone yesterday. Issei watched her expression from the corner of his eyes as they walked and smiled softly at himself, enjoying the time he spent with his mother. The walk itself was a quiet and peaceful one, with neither humans uttering a word, as if afraid to ruin the tranquility that surrounded the both of them. To the brunette's inner surprise, the walk was a long one, taking them almost completely out of Kuo. In fact, his mother had led him to the last hill that separated his hometown from the next one. To his curiosity, there was only a very small building that, despite being all the way out there, was well maintained. The fun fact about its appearance was that it didn't seem to be handled by human hands. It was as if the small building was something extraordinary, despite its size. McCain looked at the building with a small fond smile on her lips. She really liked this place. She turned her body to face Kuo Town and started to describe the day she learned she got pregnant in a fond tone. However, her son didn't listen to her. As soon as he and his mother had reached the peak of this hill and came to a close distance to the small building, his mind went on autopilot. With slow, soundless steps, he got right outside of the building's only entrance exit and took a look inside. The plain white room, with a 2x2 mat acting as a floor and the ceiling reaching 3 meters. Not windows or anything else indicating that this was a place that somebody lived in. With a very cautious step, as if something was ready to get a drop on him, he stepped inside. Seeing that nothing happened, he put his other foot inside as well. And that's when all of Zangetsu's memories got in his head. Issei learned, in a matter of few seconds, all of Zangetsu's and his previous wielders. Ichigo Kurosaki was the latter's name, adventures and shenanigans, including Ichigo Kurosaki's personal life through Zangetsu's eyes. As well as how Zangetsu and the other two powers got into this universe. Issei couldn't hold his eyes from widening in shock at all of the information. Especially since Zangetsu and the other two powers residing inside him were, literally, otherworldly. Not to mention the gigantic red dragon that brought them in this universe to be bestowed upon a human with a supernatural affinity to protect the world. It took a solid 5 minutes for Issei to calm down from the ordeal. It took him another 2 to comprehend the burden that had befallen on his shoulders. To protect the world. A teenage boy that held a massive amount of power within him, for the sole reason to protect something that was greater than himself. Talk about a bad and cold joke. Only this wasn't one, and Issei knew it. If he was humble before, now he has become even more. Because, within the whole world resided his own world. The brunette narrowed his eyes dangerously as he gazed at his still talking mother's back from inside the small room. Whatever there was in this world that would harm his parents and the innocent people, Issei would gladly take them down in a permanent fashion. His expression had gotten soft, despite his less than savory thoughts, as soon as his mother laid her eyes on him again, with him pretending that he had been listening to her story. On their way back, Issei's resolve strengthened all the more upon seeing innocent kids playing around and their parents scolding them or playing with them. Not to mention his mother's serene expression. He didn't want any of all that to disappear right under his watch. The saying he had read once, with great power comes great responsibility, never had more meaning in Issei's mind than this time. That said, there was one question that came to Issei's mind the moment he stepped into his room. How the hell do I have a supernatural affinity? Line break. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.